Hey, what's up, everybody? You know, I want to talk about something that I saw during one of Doug Walker Nostalgia Critic's newest episodes, where he basically did a sequel of the nostalgia commercials. You know, commercials from the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, I believe. Now, even though he didn't show one of those commercials, at the beginning he kind of highlighted some of the commercials we grew up on. And one of those commercials was Gobots. And Gobots, in case you don't know, was, I guess as some people put it, the younger version of Transformers for younger kids. In other words, they were easy to transform, or as they were known for in the show, in the product, convert from vehicle to robot. And just like Transformers, they had a movie. They had a film. It was called Gobots Battle of the Rock Lords, even though it didn't last long in theaters, and I think got an even worse reaction and critical reaction than Transformers did. But one thing I did see, the commercial that was aired in the highlights at the beginning, not talked about, but just highlighted, was a commercial for the Gobot action figures, for the Gobot action figure, or ship, or whatever you want to call it, power suit. Now, I can't think of the name right off the bat. I heard someone in a video talk about it earlier, Defendor or something like that. I don't know which one it was. Defendor, Guardian, or what? I can't think of the name right now. Maybe somebody out there watching this can tell me. But what was funny about this is I saw this commercial, and then I went on YouTube and I looked at some of the other classic commercials. I think the one that was highlighted. And then I looked around to see if maybe anybody knew about it, and I found this one person. I can't think of his name right now. This one user. And on his channel, he talked about this very toy. Now, he didn't have what was known as the Guardian toy, which would have been blue and all that. But instead, he had the Renegade version. But what was funny about this is that the Renegade version and the Guardian version could fit all the outfits, could fit all the what was known as the power suits. Now, if you don't know what a power suit is, a power suit basically, it doesn't matter what kind of media you hear about these kind of things in, helps increase a hero or a villain's powers and abilities. It even gives them some new ones temporarily. But what these power suits also did was they combine is when the time was needed. And I saw this in the show, and I'm pretty sure anybody that grew up in the 80s like me saw this as well. What they did is when the time was necessary, or when the time was needed, they would use the power suits to combine with this ship, this Guardian ship of theirs, and like I said, I can't think of the name right now, to become one huge robot. Now, according to this, from what this person did, is they took the action figures, both the power suits from both the Renegade and Guardian sides. He put his Gobots and Renegade action figures that he had in them, and then he put them all together with the ship. Now, what surprised him is that this thing didn't take up much shelf space. Didn't take up much shelf space. It was about like this big. I think that's what he said. About this high. I think he said about a foot tall, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe half a foot. I'm not really sure. And he even compared it with the fact that he had a Predaking combiner, a Predaking set figure, basically the Predacons combined together. He compared it to that in size, and he said this thing was bigger than all the combiners that Transformers had. Even bigger than the original Superion, and I think he might, and maybe, I guess in his mind, bigger than the Fortress Maximus, maybe not. And maybe even bigger than Metroplex. I'm not really sure, but he only showed Predaking. But that's in his vocab, in what he said. This Guardian Gobot, this basically overall this Gobot of action figure, the Guardian action figure. Well, basically Guardian Renegade, what do you want to call it, is bigger than any Transformer toys at that time. And again, getting back to my thoughts on getting back to what I was saying about the Gobot Guardian Renegade toys back in the day, and the reason people always said they were targeted towards the younger kids, younger boys, if you will, was because they were easier to figure out. They were easier. Basically, like with Leader Run, just pull out his legs, pull his arms out, flip his cockpit nose, if you will, over, and, well, there you go. Easy as pot. Over his head, and, well, there you go. It was basically like that. And I guess that's why some people looked at it like, these toys are, for a younger generation. They're more so the fact that, young kids can get, younger kids that would like Transformers, but they can't because maybe some people at that time looked at it as being more complicated, could look at a toy like this and say, you know what, this is easy to do. And what was even more funny about this is that the reason I think people said it was for a younger generation was because they were also a cheaper version. That's right. I mean, a young kid, let's say 4 or 5 years old, wants to play with a Transformer, but parents look at it and say, well, that's too, they look at the Transformers and say, man, those are too expensive, but they want a robot. What can we get them? And you got to think about back in the day, they look at these robots and they see the Gobots and they're like, a Gobot. And then they look at it and they're like, I wonder how hard this is. And they look at the price at first and they think, well, it looks cheaper, but it's not a Transformer, but it is a transforming robot. And think about it this way: they pull out the figure, they pull the toy off the shelf, they look at the instructions on the back, and then see how easy it is, and they're like, my kid could benefit better with this. And there you go. And the reason I say that is because I know from experience. My family did the exact same thing to me. My cousin, he had Transformers, a bunch of them, always wanted one. All I ever got at times was the smaller ones that were easy to do, or in this case, I got Gobots. And the Gobots were always easier to put together, like I say, figure out and transform. And getting back to this whole, what was known as the Power Warrior, or the Power Suits, or whatever you want to call them, what was unique about this is, when you take a look at a Transformer combiner, even today, even some of the reissued kind, you take a look at them, and they're a little bit more complicated to figure out than a Gobot. And this Power Warrior deal was just an example of that. It was an exact example of that, because, like I said, with the Transformer figures themselves, many people looked at them and said, oh, they're not just more expensive, but they're more complicated to figure out. But when they take a look at a Gobot toy and they see it's cheaper, but it's also easier to figure out, they go with that. And the same could be said with the combiner. They had a combiner set called the Puzzlers, and I guess maybe they were easier to do. I'm not really sure. But this Power Warrior was, like I say, just a prime example of how many people looked at the Gobot action figures, and in a way looked at it and said, well, they're not only the cheaper kind, more affordable, but them more towards younger kids, because when you put um, the Gobots or the Renegades in these power suits, as they called them, and then hooked them up to this Power Warrior ship and made them into this giant robot, you didn't have to worry about, transforming the figure back into like a car or into a certain way. All you had to do is just slip them right on, and that was it. Almost exactly, that was it. And it made it look easy. So, and a lot of people always wonder why you take a look at you take a look at GoBots now as part of the Transformer line, and you wonder why they're targeted towards younger kids. Well, there's your answer right there. You go back to the original GoBot toys in the 80s, and that will tell you everything. You go back to the commercials, you go back to everything, and that will tell you exactly why people targeted them towards a younger generation. I mean, even the movie that came out the same year as the Transformer movie was rated G, and I guess targeted towards a younger audience. So, there you go. But when you hear about the Power Warrior in these power suits, I'm pretty sure nowadays people that are just hearing about it, looking on YouTube and looking on these websites and everything, are probably saying to themselves, they're probably thinking to themselves when they're just hearing about this, like say, going on YouTube, Googling and finding out everything, they're probably saying to themselves, this power suit, this Power Warrior deal, sounds very familiar. Well, the reason it might sound familiar is because you might see similarities with, let's say, the Power Rangers. I know that sounds crazy, but let me explain. See, the Power Rangers the Power Rangers, they pilot these Zords. And depending on what kind of Zords they are, they always combine together, right? For example, you go back to Power Rangers Zeo, and I think in the middle to the end of the season, you had the Power Rangers, I think it was during the Gold Ranger saga, you had them gain these humanoid-like Zords. So think of them like that. The only difference, my friends, was the fact that when the Power Rangers would combine the Zords into the Megazord, they'd all be together in the main console, in the main piloting area. That's where they would be. But, that's the only similarity you can look at from something of today. If you look at something from the 80s, the only closest you'll get is Voltron. Because they did the exact same thing. Voltron did the same thing. They combined the lines together, and instead of being in the cockpit together, instead you had them both still piloting the lines. You still had them piloting the lines. They were still in the lines. Like, okay, I can't think of the characters' names right now, but when you had the prince, I know one of them was the princess. When you had the princess and I believe the strongman of the Voltron Force piloting the blue and yellow lion, when they would combine to become the legs, they wouldn't teleport right to the cockpit. They would remain in the legs. They would remain piloting the legs. Same with the Genius Boy and I guess the other guy, not the leader, but the guy that wore the black suit or something like that. Yeah, I think it was the black suit. It would still be in the lines when they would become the arm. Same with the leader, the pilot. He would be the same way. So, that would be the only similarity back there in the 80s that you could think of. again, like I said, the only similarity you can get of today from that whole situation is Power Rangers. That's why I'm pretty sure a lot of people will say, you know, that power suit, that Power Warrior deal, because if you look, like I said, when they would look at the commercials, they'd probably say to themselves, that seems very, very familiar. Where have I seen that before? And then, obviously, Power Rangers has to stick into your mind. So, but that's just my video on the comparisons of Gobots and Transformers and the whole combiner deals and stuff like that. So, tell me what you guys think. Do you see similarities of the Power Rangers, Megazord deals and Voltron deal from the 80s and with the Gobots and the Power Warrior and Power Suit? Do you see those similarities? Tell me what you guys think. And tell me if you do agree that the reason the Gobot figures today as part of the Transformer line are targeted towards the younger generation, because obviously that's what it seemed like they were back in the 80s. Tell me what you guys think. I'll talk to y'all later.